Tonight I'm going to tell you 3 real crime stories that all took place in Long Island. Each story is more gruesome and terrifying than the last. And the last story is particularly interesting because it's as famous as it is unsettling. In fact, it's still being spoken about in the media to this day. So stick around for that one and see if you can figure out what it is. Before we get started, if you're new here, welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me tonight. If you like these types of videos, please remember to subscribe so you don't miss my future uploads. Now let's sit back, get comfy, and enjoy tonight's Sleepless Night Tale. On December 11th, 2010, Officer John Malia was following a routine training exercise by Ocean Parkway, which is near Gilgo Beach. He was with his cadaver dogs at the time when he came across a gruesome discovery. 4 decomposing bodies wrapped in burlap right next to each other. The bodies belonged to 4 women, later referred to as the Gilgo 4. They were Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, Maureen Brainard Barnes, and Melissa Bartholomew. They were discovered during a search for a missing woman, Shannon Gilbert. Shannon was a 24-year-old sex worker who disappeared in May of that year, after making a frantic 911 call from a client's home in Oak Beach, Long Island. She told the dispatcher, "They're trying to kill me," before fleeing into the night. Her disappearance prompted a search that led to the discovery of the Gilgo 4. Shannon, however, was nowhere to be found. As the investigation continued, more remains were found in the area, including those of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, whose bodies were dismembered and scattered. The gruesome nature of these crimes and the number of victims shocked the community and started to draw national media attention. 1 year went by, and on December of 2011, Shannon would be found. Unfortunately, she had not survived. Her shoes, cell phone, and purse were discovered in a marsh about 8 miles from Gilgo Beach, and about 1 week later, her skeletal remains were discovered in the same area. Police have confirmed that the deaths of the Gilgo 4 were in fact not linked to Shannon's case, and that it was just a tragic coincidence that the search for Shannon led where it did. As terrifying as that thought is, this meant that the reality of the situation was that there were 2 unquote murderers out there, both using this area as a body dumping ground. It is still unknown to this day who Shannon's killer is. However, a break in the Gilgo 4 case would be made more than 10 years later. In July of 2023, after extensive police investigation, including DNA evidence collected from the bodies, cell phone record location data, and the witness testimonies given, the police were finally able to identify Rex Howerman, a Long Island-based architect, as the killer. He was arrested and charged with the murders of the 3 Gilgo Beach victims, Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, and Amber Costello, after DNA testing confirmed that he was indeed the killer. Howerman, a married father of 2, had been living a double life, hiding his dark secrets behind the facade of a successful professional. The arrest brought a sense of relief to the victims' families, but many questions still remained. How had Howerman managed to evade capture for so long? Were there more victims yet to be discovered? The investigation into his activities continued, with authorities searching his home and property for additional evidence. And as the details of Howerman's crimes emerged, the true extent of his brutality started to become clear. He had allegedly kept some of his victims alive for days, torturing them before finally ending their lives. The community was left grappling with the horror of what had happened. The families of the victims were relieved that the arrest had been made. However, they did continue to seek justice and closure after that. They held vigils and memorials, determined to keep the memory of their loved ones alive and to ensure that no other families would have to endure the same pain. The case of the Long Island serial killer remains one of the most chilling in recent history. While Rex Howerman awaits trial, the investigation continues, with authorities working to uncover the full extent of his crimes. To this day, Gilgo Beach has been marked with a haunting legacy, as the memory of the victims is forever etched into its past, ensuring that their memory will never be forgotten. This next story also takes place in Long Island, New York. in the late 1980s and early 1990s. At the time, this was a place of suburban tranquility. However, beneath the surface of this peaceful community, a series of gruesome discoveries were about to unfold. The bodies of young women, often dismembered, were found scattered across various locations, from the East River to the remote wooded areas. The victims were primarily sex workers, and their deaths sent waves of fear through the community. The first body was discovered in February 1989. A golfer at the Hopewell Valley Golf Club in New Jersey stumbled upon a paint can, and inside, a severed head. The victim went unidentified for years, but it was clear that a brutal killer was on the loose. It was later discovered that the head belonged to Heidi Bolsch, but this was only after the rest of her dismembered remains were discovered in a creek later. Over the next 4 years, more bodies were found, each discovery more horrifying than the last. The police were baffled by the seemingly random nature of the killings and the meticulous way in which the bodies were dismembered and disposed of. The media dubbed the unknown perpetrator as Joel the Ripper, a nod to the infamous English killer Jack the Ripper, who committed similar horrific acts in the 1800s in London. The case became a national sensation. Investigators worked tirelessly, but the killer remained elusive, and the community was gripped by fear as the pressure of law enforcement to solve the case intensified. Finally, on June 28, 1993, 4 years later, the killer's reign of terror came to an unexpected end. In the early hours of the morning, state troopers patrolling the Long Island Southern State Parkway noticed a Mazda pickup truck without a license plate. They attempted to pull the vehicle over, but the driver led them on a high-speed chase. The pursuit ended with the truck crashing into a utility pole, and as the officers approached the vehicle, they were hit by a nauseating stench. Inside the truck, they found the decomposing body of Tiffany Bresciani, a young woman who had been reported missing. The driver, a disheveled man in his mid-30s, was immediately arrested. His name was Joel Rifkin. The news of Rifkin's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The unassuming landscaper was revealed to be one of the most prolific serial killers in New York's history. During questioning, Rifkin calmly confessed to the murders of 17 women, providing chilling details of his crimes. He had targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers, luring them with the promise of money or safety before brutally killing them. As investigators delved into his past, they uncovered a pattern of violence and depravity that spanned years. Rifkin's trial was a media sensation, with the public eager to learn more about the man who had terrorized their streets. During the trial, Rifkin showed little or no remorse, describing his crimes with a disturbing detachment. He was ultimately convicted of 9 counts of murder and sentenced to 203 years to life in prison. Joel Rifkin's story is yet another chilling example of the darkness that can lurk behind the face of ordinary people. A neighbor, a friend, a coworker, or even your friendly landscaper. This last story is one that you might be familiar with, but maybe you haven't heard this side to it. In a quiet suburban town on the south shore of Long Island stood a large Dutch colonial-style house at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house, with its distinct gambrel roof and serene canal-side location, seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. And in December of 1975, George and Kathy, along with their 3 children, did just that. They moved into the house, eager to begin the new chapter of their lives. The family was thrilled with their new home, which they had purchased at a surprisingly low price. The house came fully furnished as the previous owners had left everything behind. On their first day, a friend suggested that they have the house blessed. George, a non-practicing Methodist, and Kathy, a non-practicing Catholic, agreed and invited the local priest, Father Mancuso, to perform the blessing. As Father Mancuso sprinkled holy water and recited prayers, he suddenly felt an icy chill and heard a deep, commanding voice telling him to get out. He warned the family, but did not elaborate on his experience. The family brushed off his concerns, attributing them to the house's age and the cold winter weather. However, after that, strange occurrences began almost immediately. George, who had always been an early riser, found himself waking up at 3:15 a.m. every night, feeling an inexplicable urge to check the boathouse. And Kathy experienced vivid nightmares about the house's history. Even the family's dog Harry refused to enter certain rooms of the house and would bark incessantly at seemingly nothing. As the days passed, the disturbances grew more intense. Doors would slam shut on their own, and foul odors would permeate the house. Strange green slime even began to ooze from the walls. I know it sounds crazy, but multiple people claim to have seen this. The husband, George, became increasingly irritable and obsessed with the fireplace, constantly chopping wood to keep a fire burning. And at one point, Kathy felt an unseen force embrace her, leaving red welts on her skin. But those experiences were nothing compared to what happened next. One night, Kathy woke up to find George awake, just staring blankly at her, his face twisted into a grotesque expression. He claimed he had seen a demonic figure with glowing red eyes in their bedroom. The children also reported seeing shadowy figures and hearing disembodied voices calling their names. The final straw, however, came when their youngest daughter, Missy, began to speak to an imaginary friend named Jody, who she described as being a pig with glowing red eyes. Terrified and desperate, the family reached out to paranormal investigators, who conducted a thorough investigation during which they experienced and documented numerous paranormal phenomena. The woman, Lorraine, a clairvoyant, felt a malevolent presence in the house and warned the family that their lives were in danger. Despite the findings, the disturbances continued to escalate, and the family could no longer endure the terror that had taken over their home. After just 28 days, they fled the house, leaving all their belongings behind. They moved in with Kathy's mother, vowing never to return. The family in question were George and Katie Lutz, and the investigators were none other than the now famous Ed and Lorraine Warren, the same investigators who documented findings in the Conjuring house. This story quickly gained media attention, and their experiences were chronicled in a best-selling book and subsequent film adaptations. This book and film series was none other than the Amityville Horror. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue became infamous, drawing curious onlookers and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. It was only then that the true history of the house was revealed. Just over a year before the Lutzes moved in, the house had been the site of a gruesome mass murder. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. had shot and killed 6 members of his family as they slept. DeFeo claimed he had been driven to commit the murders by voices in his head, and some believed that the house itself was possessed by a malevolent force. The Lutz's harrowing ordeal and the tragic events that preceded it cemented this house's reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America.
Sleepless Night Tales,
and there you have it. Did you guess the last story? Thanks for joining me tonight. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time for more Sleepless Night Tales.